I'm defending myself, rationale going on, which actually might be very true eventually. Why you're on the ground is a whole different story, but once you're there.
Right.
Whereas, if you're sitting on the other side of the planet, or you're sitting 1,000 miles away, or you're sitting in an office and you're not being physically threatened, but you are more effectively, targeting and killing people, then you have actually the luxury of comfort, which allows you the space to think about what's going on around you and to think rationally. So I find it very helpful that people are having such difficulty doing this, because that goes to what the non-killing anthropologists argue, that we are really evolutionarily wired to not kill.
Right.
Because societies that were violent, where there was a lot of killing, were not conducive to being able to rear the next generation to reproductive age. So and you go to the First World War, and don't quote me on the numbers, but something like around 20% of only 20% could actually, when they got close enough to see the opponent's eyes, could pull the trigger. And that, through various sophisticated training and torture through training, dehumanization, has really been able to be increased. But, having no journalistic boots on the ground, means that we are not seeing the horrors of the killing. Right. At best, we're seeing the aftermath, or at best, we're seeing somebody with a cell phone ducking for cover. But mostly what we see are ruined buildings and not the horror. So as humans on Earth, we're not getting that human response because of how these images are packaged.
Norm, can I ask you, as we were just talking about the drones, to talk about, and whistleblowers, to talk about Daniel Hale?
Yes, I understand Daniel Hale has been released from prison. He had a 4-year sentence, and I was very pleased to write about him in the book, although it's a very disgraceful record from the U.S. He was a drone whistleblower, and he provided The Intercept with a lot of information about how so many of the drone strikes from the U.S. were killing women and children and other civilians, and they just threw the book at him. There, in War Made Invisible, there's what I and many other people found a very moving letter that he wrote to the judge. He said, I couldn't do anything else. I saw what was going on.
Right.
I sent the information because I thought the public had a right to know.
Well, he did such a service, and I know, I and some of us here in upstate New York have been very involved with, whatever we want, drawing attention to the drone programs, and we certainly have one up in Niagara Falls and in Syracuse, and he shed so much light on what that really was like. Also, Lisa Ling, who you also include in the book, and just that going that direction. It's back to and this what's going to happen also domestically, because the more they say, oh well, we don't want our to put our enlisted people in harm's way. Well, also the police. I'm sure we don't want to put them in harm's way. So there's already been a law in, I believe it was in North Dakota or South Dakota, that they allow non-lethal weapons on drones. And the reason was because of Standing Rock and all what was going on there. But when the more militarized and the more our military is going around doing what they're doing around the world, the more I fear for the rest of the world and our survival, and also in this country, it's going to come back to bite us. It already has, to a certain extent, with the militarization of the police and all the war materiel that's being used by police departments.
Yeah, no doubt the aphorism applies. What goes around comes around. The violence, as you know, in War Made Invisible, I write a lot about the violent training and then the increase in domestic violence, the use of what the Pentagon calls its 1033 program to send really MRAPs and many military, obviously military equipment aspects into the police force. As a matter of fact, when there were so many hundreds of Black Lives Matter protests in the streets, people were facing off against military equipment from the Pentagon.
Right. So we just, we just can't have it. We just can't have it.
And it's not just here; it's global. In Costa Rica, which famously, supposedly does not have a military, but the U.S. started flooding them with police aid.
Oh, God.
So that, the police in Costa Rica walk around in camouflage, oftentimes carrying guns, in a country that doesn't have a military, because this is the aid that we're sending.
I just want to mention that Fear Inc. again. Fear Inc. Cha-ching. That's where all the money goes. I don't, it's just so concerning. So let us move on to what people can do. What people can do to get more informed and to get more involved. So the first thing I'm going to start it right off with, buy this book. So War Made Invisible is really, really great. Really a great book. There's just so much in it. So there's both the data, the actual facts and the numbers and the correlations, and the stories, the personal stories that just make it so compelling. So this is excellent, and I've been using it in my discussions about the topic to help people understand what's really going on. So that's one thing. But so from the two of you, what are some of your suggestions of things people can do?
Well, I'd love to hear some suggestions about, from one standpoint, journalism. I
mean, as individuals, what people can do is people can make noise. And I think I've been standing locally with Jewish Voice for Peace because I kind of feel that I don't have the luxury of not making noise, because what Netanyahu is doing and what the Israeli government is doing is an existential threat to the idea of Jewish values.
Right.
And as far as what journalists can do, the thing is that it's what's happening to journalism, and that, I think about the various venues, that would publish my syndicated columns and how many of them no longer exist. So, what we really need to do is we need to look at journalism as a social good. So not just what can journalists do. My students in journalism tend to migrate out of the field when they start seeing, that their fellow majors in the department who are concentrating in public relations and advertising, have lots of job prospects when they graduate that pay living wages. Whereas in journalism classes, one of the things we teach them is how to get arrested. And then the jobs seem to be fewer and far between, and with pretty low entry level wages. And then once people get these entry level jobs in journalism, they come back to me very frustrated, not about what they do, but what they're not allowed to do, and what they're discouraged from covering. So it's a crisis in journalism, and that journalism is a social good. We need to, and I say we now as like we the people, we need to be out there on the streets demanding a better system for funding journalism as a social good. And then as journalists, well, I think right now those of us who call ourselves journalists are very privileged to be able to do so, because so few people actually get the opportunity to be a journalist, and those that do are mostly shackled in what they can do as a journalist. And one of the biggest problems with the kind of investigative reporting, which is a kind of reporting that that you're talking about, Norman, is that it is expensive. So because it takes a lot of time,
Right.
I don't have to, and that really stresses out the model by which we fund most journalism still, which is a corporate model of being cost effective. And right now, most people, and most young people, and I'm thinking it's old people too, are really foregoing, looking for journalistic sources and going towards a more dopaminergic, social media, entertainment, because it's kind of exciting them on a neurological level. So whereas journalism involves facts, and all the stories, everything we're talking about is complicated. It doesn't fit into a 20-second TikTok. So, and it doesn't make you laugh, and it doesn't make you rage. Well, it does make you rage, but more slowly, So I don't know. It's an existential crisis in journalism that we need to find new ways to support journalism. Okay, so what can we do? We can subscribe, and we can support journalistic organizations. We can look at not-for-profit, organizations like locally the Investigative Post.
Yes.
And and nationally, ProPublica, and try to support them, because
And Democracy Now.
And Democracy Now, because these are about the most important thing. But because we live in our silos, even if they're out there, most people will not. The people who need to see them won't see them.
Well, I completely agree with that. I think that assessment of our journalistic status quo is very clear and is a reality that we're going to have to come to terms with. It really is a low point, I think, in our lifetimes for journalism in this country. The folding of newspapers and just the diminishment of the interest in journalism in ostensibly journalistic outlets such as daily papers. I don't need to tell you, if you've got a daily paper around, how it has shrunk conceptually and often literally in terms of just the news that's available, and the quality and quantity just diminishing. Meanwhile, from an activist standpoint, sustaining a local peace center, sustaining organizations that are, whether it's fashionable or not, whether there is negativity directed at it or not, continues to assert that diplomacy is better than bombing people, and that there is negotiation as a process that leads people and countries to find, if not perfect solutions, at least a different way of relating to each other than threats and military action. Right now, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, as this year comes along, I'm personally also excited about Daniel Ellsberg Week. I think that it's not only crucial to keep Daniel Ellsberg's legacy alive as somebody who can be ignored by mass media, but to reinvigorate what he was all about, and so many other people have been about. A quick anecdote: we at the Institute for Public Accuracy and Roots Action took 535 copies of The Doomsday Machine and hand-delivered them to every member of the House and Senate's office in Washington, D.C., with personal letters from Daniel Ellsberg, not just Dear Senator, but Dear Senator Jones, Dear Senator Smith. And there were many times when I walked into the office of a congressperson, was greeted at the desk, the front desk, by an employee who worked for that congressperson, and I would say, oh, here's a book and a letter for Congressperson Jones from Daniel Ellsberg, and guess what I would hear?
Wow.
I'm not familiar with that name, Daniel Ellsberg. And so this is a great example. These are people who work in the United States Congress. So all the more reason that we, and this is part of the quest, we're going to have vigils, demonstrations, teach-ins between June 10th and 16th. Anybody can find out more by going to diffusenuclearwar.org. That's diffusenuclearwar.org. One of the many things people can do is go to city councils for proclamations. They can also go to the relevant agencies and commissions and say, we want to name Daniel Ellsberg Library. We want to name Daniel Ellsberg Elementary School so that it won't be so easy for those who want to erase who he was to just shunt aside the tremendous work that he has done.
Well, actually, when we signed up to support Daniel Ellsberg, there was a great list of different things that we can do. And just because I said we're going to go to Northrop Grumman, that's not necessarily the only thing we're going to do. So
Wonderful.
We'll see what else we can do. But definitely, helping, just one of the things I think people just helping to get our friends and neighbors aware. Just keep talking about these things. We even, and building, the common ground. Even, I know a lot of times people think, we're coming from two different places, but there's a lot of overlap. And then if you can get people to see some of the overlap, then they can sometimes start to see what some of the points we're making, and how it relates to their personal lives.
And you can repackage these points and translate them into a slightly different language called conservative, right?
Sure.
And stop focusing on the ethics and start focusing on the economics.
Oh, and the economics.
Right.
We were just talking about that.
So
the economics are in here
because
big
there are
time.
so many arguments we could use. We need to tailor them to the audience that's in front of us.
Always.
And then the most difficult part is to actually talk to people who support fascist movements like MAGA,
right?
Because that's the only hope. Is and when you talk to them, you find out that they have many of the same grievances and many of the same hopes.
Exactly.
And it's just a matter of packaging this into, this is healthy.
So, I'm going to say, I'm sorry to say that we're almost out of time. So, I really only have time. I would like to give you final words, but so let's take those as the final words of some of the things that we can do, and then use our imagination, and work with each other, try to be the change. But I first of all, I just need to take the time to thank you both so much. Well, Mike, right here, and Norm, we just can't thank you enough for
we really
all
appreciate
you do.
you coming and joining us on the show today.
Well, many, many thanks to you both. I just appreciate what you're both doing. It's just keep on keeping on, because that's what it's about.
Well, we're going to do that, and with your inspiration, your insights and inspiration make it so much easier, because you've done so much and you continue to do so much. So we can't thank you enough.
And if we get a Daniel Ellsberg Avenue in Buffalo, that's on you, Norman. Thank you.
Yeah. We'll be working on that. So
Wonderful.
Thank you so very much. This is Talking Peace, and together we've been talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so much. We did it.